Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing legends ever documented in the history of the Ozark Mountains. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the summer of 1901, a county clerk named Thomas Garrett was sorting through decades of neglected records in the Shannon County Courthouse basement when he made a discovery that would unearth a buried horror. The courthouse, a stolid structure of local limestone and oak built in 1871, had suffered water damage that necessitated extensive renovations. While moving a heavy filing cabinet that appeared to have been deliberately positioned against a section of wall, Garrett's hand closed around something wedged in the narrow gap behind it, a leather-bound journal. Its cover cracked with age and stained by moisture that had seeped through the limestone over years of deliberate concealment. The faded, spidery handwriting inside was immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with county affairs during the previous decade. It belonged to Sheriff Martin Holloway, who had served from 1897 until his unexplained disappearance in 1898. According to Garrett's statement, preserved in the Shannon County Historical Society archives, he had scarcely read 10 pages before realizing the significance of what he held. The journal documented what would later become known as the Blackwood Hollow Incident, a series of events so disturbing that county officials had systematically erased all official records of its occurrence. Garrett delivered his discovery to Judge William Harmon the following morning, after which both the journal and Garrett himself seemed to have been deliberately removed from public scrutiny. County employment records show Garrett was reassigned to the Northern District Office within 3 days, effectively isolating him from anyone who might inquire about his discovery. The journal itself, alongside several sealed evidence boxes mentioned in its final pages, disappeared from official records until 1963, when a courthouse inventory during later renovations listed miscellaneous historical documents in a locked storage room that had been plastered over sometime after 1901. What follows is a reconstruction based on Sheriff Holloway's recovered writings, fragmented newspaper accounts from neighboring counties, witness testimonies collected decades after the events, and physical evidence that remained hidden for nearly a century. This is the story of Blackwood Hollow, a settlement whose name was deliberately struck from maps and whose fate represents perhaps the most unsettling chapter in Ozark history. Blackwood Hollow appeared on Shannon County maps in 1891, nestled within a narrow valley flanked by steep limestone bluffs approximately 18 miles southwest of Eminence. The settlement owed its existence to Josiah Blackwood, a former Missouri Pacific Railroad engineer who had amassed modest wealth during the railroad expansion of the 1882nd before seeking opportunity in the timber-rich Ozark Highlands. County land records indicate Blackwood purchased nearly 200 acres for what was then considered a suspiciously low price. The previous owner, a reclusive trapper named Samuel Hawkins, had reportedly abandoned the property after claiming the valley was not right for human dwelling. Blackwood dismissed such concerns as superstition and quickly established a small logging camp that would grow steadily over the following 6 years. By 1897, according to tax records recovered from neighboring Texas County, Blackwood Hollow boasted approximately 40 permanent residents, a water-powered sawmill positioned along the creek that bisected the valley floor, a general store operated by Martha Owens, a widow from Springfield, and scattered homesteads built from the abundant local timber. The settlement's isolation was profound, even by Ozark standards of the period. A single wagon road served as the only connection to the outside world, winding through dense forest and crossing several creek beds that routinely flooded during spring rains. Winter conditions regularly rendered this tenuous link impassable for weeks at a time. Correspondence between Blackwood and a lumber buyer in Street Louis, dated October 1896, acknowledges this challenge. Anticipate no shipments between December and March as customary. Have increased autumn delivery accordingly. Despite these limitations, county assessment records describe the settlement as prosperous, if peculiarly isolated, with a sawmill producing high-quality hardwood lumber that commanded premium prices in Street Louis and Springfield markets. Sheriff Holloway's journal notes that most residents were single men drawn by reliable employment, though 5 families had established homesteads by late 1896, including Blackwood himself, who lived with his daughter Emma in the largest house. Positioned on a slight rise overlooking the sawmill operation, Holloway made 3 documented visits to Blackwood Hollow prior to the incidents of 1897, describing Josiah as a man of unusual intensity and intelligence, perhaps too educated for comfort among the rough men he employs. His final routine visit occurred in August 1897, during which he noted nothing overtly unusual beyond the peculiar stillness of the forest surrounding the hollow, absent of the usual bird calls and animal movements one expects in these mountains. This profound isolation, initially a mere logistical challenge, would soon become the critical factor that allowed the horror that followed to remain hidden from outside eyes for crucial months. Thomas Fletcher's disappearance on September 18, 1897, marked the beginning of the Blackwood Hollow incident, though its significance would not be fully understood until months later. Fletcher was no ordinary hunter, but rather a fixture of the Ozark wilderness, having spent over 20 years navigating its remote hollows and ridges after moving from Tennessee in the 1872. According to Sheriff Holloway's journal, Fletcher had established himself as the primary meat supplier for the Blackwood settlement, known for his almost uncanny ability to track game through the densest forest. His unexplained absence was first noted by Martha Owens when he failed to deliver promised venison to her store. After 3 days without sign of the hunter, Josiah Blackwood himself rode to Eminence to report the disappearance, a journey that took nearly 7 hours on horseback. Holloway's entry from September 22 details his immediate organization of a search party, comprising 8 local men familiar with the terrain, along with Fletcher's 3 hunting dogs, animals known throughout the county for their tracking abilities. The search extended over 6 days and covered an estimated 12 square miles of extremely difficult terrain surrounding Blackwood Hollow. "We found nothing," Holloway wrote, "not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not a single shell casing," though Fletcher was known to carry a Remington rifle and would have hunted actively. Most unsettling was the behavior of Fletcher's dogs, which Holloway described in unusual detail. The animals performed as expected initially, ranging ahead of the search party with apparent purpose. However, upon reaching a particular ridge, approximately 2 miles northwest of the settlement, all 3 dogs simultaneously stopped, their behavior changing dramatically. The animals refused to proceed further, Holloway noted, whining and backing away as if confronted by some unseen threat. No amount of coaxing would compel them forward. Most disturbing was their fixed attention on empty air, tracking with their eyes something that remained invisible to us. Holloway further recorded that one searcher, Daniel Carver, claimed to hear a sound like distant voices, speaking words just beyond understanding, when they attempted to push past this invisible boundary. By September 28, Holloway was forced to abandon the search, officially listing Fletcher as missing, presumed deceased from accident or exposure. His final note on the matter, however, reveals lingering unease. "I have witnessed dogs refuse ground where bear or mountain lion scent was present, but never have I seen animals behave as these did, staring at nothing with such evident terror. Something in those woods affected them beyond normal animal caution, something they perceived while we remained blind to it." Following Fletcher's disappearance, an insidious change began to manifest within Blackwood Hollow, subtle at first but increasingly apparent as autumn deepened. Sheriff Holloway's journal entries from late October note his receipt of a letter from Martha Owens expressing concern about behavioral changes observed among several residents. This letter, part of a correspondence with her sister in Springfield that was discovered during a home renovation in 1952, provides the most detailed contemporary account of the settlement's gradual transformation. "Josiah has taken to sitting on his front porch facing the northern ridge," Owens wrote on November 3, "remaining motionless from dusk until well past midnight, regardless of the increasingly bitter cold. His eyes remain fixed on some point among the trees that I cannot identify. When addressed, he responds as if awakening from a deep sleep, momentarily confused by his surroundings before resuming normal conversation. The following night, he returns to the same position, as if drawn by some obligation, only he comprehends. Similar behavior was documented in 5 other men, all employees of the sawmill who had participated in the search for Fletcher. According to Holloway's November investigation notes, these men began to neglect personal hygiene and spoke increasingly of voices from the trees, calling their names after sundown. William Carver, the sawmill foreman, reported to Holloway that productivity had fallen dramatically as workers would stop suddenly, tools in hand, and turn toward the forest as if hearing someone call to them, though no sound was apparent to others nearby. Most concerning were Holloway's observations about physical changes beginning to manifest. The affected men appear increasingly gaunt despite regular meals. Their skin has taken on an unusual pallor, and several display involuntary muscle spasms, particularly around the neck and jaw. When questioned directly about these symptoms, they seem unable to comprehend concern, insisting they feel more alive than before. Holloway's journal indicates he consulted with Dr. James Morton from Eminence, who suggested the possibility of ergot poisoning from contaminated grain, though examination of the settlement's food stores revealed no evidence of fungal contamination. The doctor's letter to Holloway, preserved in the county medical records, notes his unease. While certain symptoms align with known conditions, the specificity of the behavioral changes and their concentration among those who ventured to the Northwest Ridge during the Fletcher search suggests something beyond typical illness. The reported auditory hallucinations, consistently describing voices that speak words not quite like proper English but somehow understandable from precisely the same section of forest, defies medical explanation. The winter of 1897 descended upon the Ozarks with unusual ferocity, as if nature itself sought to isolate Blackwood Hollow from outside intervention. Meteorological records from the Springfield Weather Station, archived at the Missouri Historical Society, document the first significant snowfall on December 3rd, unusually early and exceptionally heavy for the region. By December 10th, accumulated snow had reached 18 inches throughout Shannon County, with drifts in valleys and low-lying areas reportedly exceeding 5 feet. Sheriff Holloway's journal entries reveal 3 separate attempts to reach Blackwood Hollow during December, each more desperate than the last. His final attempt on December 23rd ended when his horse became hopelessly mired in snow approximately 7 miles from the settlement. "The drifts along the narrow passage stand taller than a man on horseback," he wrote, "and the temperature has fallen so severely that exposed skin freezes within minutes. No human passage to Blackwood is possible under these conditions." Weather station records confirm that temperatures throughout the region remained below freezing for nearly 6 consecutive weeks between mid-December and late January, with several periods where nighttime temperatures plunged below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. The few scattered homesteads between Eminence and Blackwood Hollow reported no sightings of travelers in either direction during this period. Holloway's growing concern manifests in increasingly frequent journal entries throughout January, particularly after receiving reports from hunters who ventured near the region that they observed unusual lights moving among the trees near Blackwood Hollow and claimed to hear sounds like distant machinery operating deep in the night, despite the known shutdown of the sawmill for winter. Most disturbing was a report from Jacob Wilson, a trapper who maintained a line approximately 3 miles east of the settlement, who told Holloway in late January that on still nights he could hear a sound like chanting, but in no language I ever heard, carrying through the frozen air. What actually transpired in Blackwood Hollow during these months would only be pieced together later through fragmentary evidence and the traumatized testimony of the sole survivor. The settlement's isolation, initially a mere geographic reality, had become something more sinister. A telegram from Holloway to the county judge, dated February 1st, reveals his growing unease. Weather prevents access, but reports of unusual occurrences continue. Request authorization for larger expedition when conditions permit. Fear significant danger to Blackwood residents. The judge's response, tersely noting, authorization granted for reasonable measures when weather allows, would set in motion the grim discovery that awaited when the thaw finally came. Unbeknownst to Holloway, the settlement he sought to reach had already transformed into something that would defy explanation and challenge the very foundations of rational understanding. The thaw began in the third week of February 1898, as unseasonably warm winds swept up from the south, melting the accumulated snow with startling rapidity. By February 25th, Sheriff Holloway determined that the road to Blackwood Hollow, while muddy and treacherous, had become passable enough for mounted travel. His journal describes departing Eminence before dawn on February 26th, accompanied by deputies Samuel Harris and William Thornton, carrying additional supplies in anticipation of finding the settlement in desperate condition after their long isolation. The journey proved arduous, requiring nearly 11 hours to navigate the deeply rutted road, now transformed into a morass of mud and half-frozen slush. Holloway recorded their arrival at the outskirts of Blackwood Hollow just as dusk was settling, noting his immediate concern at the absence of smoke from chimneys despite the lingering cold. "Our calls went unanswered," he wrote in his February 27th entry, composed by lantern light in Martha Owen's abandoned store. "The settlement stands intact yet utterly devoid of human presence. No bodies, no signs of violence or struggle, no indication of orderly departure. Blackwood Hollow appears abandoned, as if by some rapture that came without warning." The detailed inventory of their search reveals the disturbing nature of the abandonment. In the Blackwood home, they discovered a dinner table set for two, the food upon plates dried and moldering, chairs pushed back, as if the occupants had simply stood up and walked away mid-meal. The general store's ledger remained open on the counter, Martha Owen's handwriting trailing off mid-entry. At the sawmill, tools lay precisely where they had been set down, including a half-sawn log still positioned in the cutting guide with sawdust undisturbed below it. Most chilling were the personal effects left behind. "Every home contains the full measure of its residents' possessions," Holloway noted. "Clothing, valuables, family photographs, personal correspondence, all remain where daily use would place them. Even winter coats hang from pegs beside doors. Not a single trunk or traveling bag appears to be missing." The following day brought an expanded search of the surrounding forest, yielding no bodies, no graves, no tracks leading away from the settlement. "Nearly 40 souls resided here according to county records," Holloway wrote, his handwriting increasingly unsteady as the entry progressed. "All have vanished without explanation. I find myself constantly looking over my shoulder, unable to shake the sensation of being watched from the forest edge." Deputy Thornton reports the same unease, while Harris has taken to keeping his revolver unholstered as we search. "Most unsettling is the profound silence. No birds sing in the surrounding trees. No small animals rustle in the undergrowth. It is as if all living things have abandoned this place, leaving only the empty structures as monuments to those who have vanished." The discovery of a survivor occurred on February 28th, as Holloway and his deputies were conducting a secondary search of the abandoned dwellings. Deputy Thornton was the first to spot the figure emerging from the tree line at the northwestern edge of the settlement, initially training his rifle on what he described as a walking corpse before recognizing the shambling form as human. Holloway's journal captures the moment in haunting detail. A girl of perhaps 17 years, though hardship has aged her beyond recognition at first glance. Her dress hanging in tatters, feet bare despite frost still clinging to the ground, hair matted with filth and what appears to be pine sap. Most disturbing is her gait, lurching yet fluid, in a manner that unsettles the eye, as if she has forgotten the proper way humans move. They identified her as Emma Blackwood, Josiah's daughter, though her physical condition had deteriorated dramatically since Holloway had last seen her in November. According to his notes, Emma had lost perhaps 30 pounds from her already slight frame, her skin exhibiting a grayish pallor except for her fingertips, which were stained an inexplicable black. "She shows no surprise at our presence," Holloway wrote, "nor relief at being found. Her eyes remain fixed on the forest, even as we speak to her, as if anticipating something emerging from the trees." When questioned about the settlement's inhabitants, Emma responded with a phrase she would repeat without variation over subsequent interrogations. "They went into the trees. They were called, and they went." Attempts to elicit more specific information about her father, the timing of the disappearances, or her own survival met with vacant stares or repetition of the same phrase. Deputies transported Emma to Eminence the following day, where Dr. James Morton examined her. His medical report, preserved in county records, documents severe malnourishment and exposure consistent with extended periods outdoors during winter conditions, yet notes the peculiar absence of expected frostbite damage. More concerning were his observations of her mental state. Patient exhibits unnaturally dilated pupils that respond minimally to direct light. She maintains periods of absolute stillness, punctuated by sudden, jerking movements of her head toward empty corners of the room as if tracking invisible movement. When asked what she is watching, she merely whispers, "They followed me here," without elaboration. Most unsettling was Morton's final notation, added as a personal observation rather than medical finding. "Though I find no physical evidence beyond malnourishment and exposure, this child appears touched by something beyond ordinary human suffering. Her gaze holds knowledge no person should possess, and I find myself unable to maintain eye contact with her for more than a few seconds without experiencing profound discomfort." On March 1st, after securing Emma in eminence under Dr. Morton's care, Sheriff Holloway returned to Blackwood Hollow with 4 additional deputies to conduct a more thorough investigation of the abandoned settlement. Their systematic search led them to Josiah Blackwood's personal office, a small but well-appointed room attached to the rear of the sawmill. Unlike other buildings which showed signs of hasty abandonment, Blackwood's office appeared meticulously organized, as if deliberately preserved for future discovery. Holloway's journal describes finding leather-bound ledgers arranged chronologically on a polished oak desk, alongside surveying equipment, timber samples, and a half-empty bottle of Kentucky bourbon. The business records reveal Blackwood as fastidiously methodical, Holloway noted, with precise accounting of every log harvested, every board milled, every sale completed. His handwriting remains consistent and elegant through years of entries until November 1897, when a noticeable deterioration begins. The most revealing document was Blackwood's personal journal, in which he maintained operational notes distinct from financial records. Entries from mid-November documented an unusual discovery made while clearing a new cutting section approximately 3 miles northwest of the settlement, precisely in the area where Fletcher had disappeared and his dogs had refused to proceed. Workers uncovered what Blackwood describes as a circle of standing stones, clearly not natural formation, yet weathered as if ancient. Holloway wrote, Blackwood notes the unusual properties of the stones, particularly their coloration, described as gray in daylight but displaying an oily iridescence when viewed at dusk. Most concerning is his observation that the ground within the circle remains barren, despite the surrounding forest's dense undergrowth. Subsequent entries documented Blackwood's growing fascination with the site, including his decision to visit the stones at night against the protests of some workers. A December 4th entry noted, Fletcher was right. The clearing holds unusual acoustic properties after dark. Sounds carry differently there. By December 8th, the entries grew increasingly disjointed, with references to whispers that form words only at the edge of hearing and movement glimpsed only in peripheral vision. The final entry, dated December 12th, consisted of a single line. The stones speak at night. Fletcher heard them first. Now we all do. Attached to the journal's inside cover was a crude but precisely measured map showing the location of the stone circle relative to known landmarks, with distances carefully noted in Blackwood's hand. Sheriff Holloway reported feeling a profound dread upon examining this map, yet found himself compelled to organize an expedition to the site. Something terrible happened at those stones, he wrote, something that emptied an entire settlement without trace of violence or flight. Logic dictates we must investigate, though every instinct warns against it. Sheriff Holloway departed at dawn on March 3rd, 1898, leading a reluctant party consisting of deputies Harris, Thornton, Miller, and Jenkins toward the location marked on Blackwood's map. His journal entry, written that evening by firelight in a hastily established camp well away from their discovery, reveals both the physical challenges of their journey and an escalating sense of wrongness that infected the group. The terrain grows increasingly difficult as we approach the marked location, he wrote. Vegetation thickens unnaturally, with brambles and fallen trees blocking logical paths forward, forcing constant detours. Deputy Miller remarked that the forest itself seems to actively resist our passage, a sentiment I initially dismissed as superstition until experiencing it myself. Vines snag ankles with almost purposeful persistence. Branches that appear solid crack unexpectedly when weight is applied. Even our horses grew increasingly agitated, requiring constant calming. After nearly 7 hours of arduous travel through merely 3 miles of forest, the party emerged into what Holloway described as a perfectly circular clearing, approximately 30 feet in diameter, surrounded by dense woods that terminate with unnatural abruptness at its perimeter. Within stood 7 weathered limestone monoliths arranged in a precise circle, each standing between 7 and 9 feet tall and approximately 2 feet in diameter. The stones bore no chisel marks, yet were unmistakably worked rather than natural formations. At the center stood a flat, altar-like stone approximately 4 feet across, bearing carvings that Holloway described as resembling no language or symbology known to me, yet creating the unsettling impression of meaning just beyond comprehension. The sheriff noted several disturbing properties of the site that defied natural explanation. Despite the surrounding forest's lush undergrowth, not a single blade of grass or sapling grew within the circle, the ground consisting of bare earth with an unusual dark coloration. Most troubling, he wrote, was our discovery that compass needles spin uselessly within 30 yards of the stones, rendering navigation impossible in their vicinity. The very air feels different here, heavier somehow, as if the normal rules governing the physical world operate differently within this space. Holloway documented the rapidly deteriorating morale of his deputies, particularly after Jenkins observed that the shadows cast by the monoliths moved contrary to the sun's position, sometimes stretching toward us rather than away. The expedition collected soil samples and made careful sketches of the carvings before retreating to establish camp at a distance that Holloway described as sufficient that we no longer feel watched by empty air. His final notation that evening reveals his conflicted state. Scientific rationality suggests ancient indigenous construction, yet every primal instinct warns of profound wrongness here. We will return at first light to complete our investigation, though I confess sleep seems unlikely as the stones remain visible through the trees, and I cannot shake the impression they have somehow drawn closer since darkness fell. The return to the stone circle on the morning of March 4th revealed details obscured during their initial discovery, most significantly what Deputy Harris initially mistook for an animal burrow near the base of the central altar stone. Closer examination revealed a small leather pouch, blackened with age and partially buried in the unusually dark soil. Holloway's journal meticulously catalogs the contents they discovered upon carefully opening the deteriorated container. The first item appears to be a whistle carved from human bone, specifically a finger phalanx of considerable age, he wrote. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, with precision bore holes that produce no sound when air is forced through them, though Deputy Miller reported feeling a strange pressure in his ears upon my attempt. The second item was a small clay jar sealed with beeswax and sinew, containing approximately 2 ounces of an unidentified black substance with the consistency of wet ash. Holloway noted that the substance possessed unusual properties, appearing to shift slightly when not directly observed and leaving a persistent residue on gloves that proved impossible to remove completely. Most significant were several fragments of what appeared to be journal pages, preserved despite their age by the unusual dryness of the soil around the stones. The pages contained spidery, almost illegible handwriting that Holloway initially believed to be heavily coded. The script alternates between recognizable English words and sequences of characters resembling no alphabet with which I am familiar, he wrote. Even the English portions follow grammatical structures that render them nearly incomprehensible. Upon returning to eminence, Holloway forwarded these fragments to Professor Alan Woodbridge, a linguistics expert at Washington University in St. Louis, known for his work on obscure regional dialects. Woodbridge's response, preserved in county records and dated April 2nd, 1898, expressed both academic fascination and personal disquiet. The non-English portions appear to be neither cipher nor nonsense, Woodbridge wrote, but rather fragments of a language predating European settlement, yet bearing no relation to any known indigenous American tongue. Its closest structural affinities suggest Mesopotamian origins, which is geographically impossible, yet linguistically undeniable. The professor's partial translation of comprehensible sections included references to those who dwell in the spaces between trees, vessels emptied for new purpose, and most disturbingly, the summoning that cannot be undone once voices are heard. Woodbridge's letter concluded with an unusual personal plea. I strongly advise against further investigation of these stones. The text contains ritual elements suggesting dangerous purpose, and I find myself experiencing vivid nightmares since beginning this translation. If similar artifacts are discovered, I respectfully request you forward them elsewhere, as I must decline further involvement. Upon returning from the Stone Circle on March 5th, Sheriff Holloway found Emma Blackwood's condition had improved physically under Dr. Morton's care, though her psychological state remained severely compromised. The interview, conducted in the physician's study with Dr. Morton present, was meticulously documented in Holloway's journal, over 7 pages of increasingly troubled handwriting. Initially, Emma maintained the same vacant repetition that had characterized her earlier responses, but Holloway noted a significant change when he produced a sketch of the stone circle. Her entire demeanor transformed upon seeing the drawing, he wrote. A violent trembling overtook her body, and for the first time she made direct eye contact, her pupils contracting to pinpoints despite the room's dim lighting. What followed was the first coherent testimony about the events preceding the disappearances. According to Emma, her father had become fixated on the stone circle immediately following Fletcher's disappearance, visiting the site initially by day but soon making regular journeys after nightfall. He would go there at night with a lantern, she stated in the transcript, sometimes staying until dawn. Then he began taking others from the mill, 5 men at first. They would return looking the same but different. When pressed to explain this contradiction, Emma described subtle but unsettling changes in both behavior and physicality. Their movements weren't right anymore, she explained. Too stiff when stillness was needed, then too fluid when motion was required, like their joints worked differently. Their eyes didn't blink enough, even in sawdust, and they spoke strangely, as if learning how to use their tongues, placing emphasis on incorrect syllables and pausing at unnatural points in sentences. According to Emma, these altered men began to influence others in the settlement, convincing or compelling them to visit the stones after dark. By early December, nearly half the adult population exhibited these subtle changes. Most disturbing was her testimony regarding her father. By December 10th, I knew with certainty that the man living in our house was not my father, she stated. He wore father's face and spoke with father's voice, but something looked out from behind his eyes that recognized me only as an object of curiosity. Emma described hiding in a storage cellar for several days as the altered residents began gathering others each night, leading them into the forest toward the stone circle. They took everyone, she whispered. Mothers carried infants. Children followed willingly, as if hearing beautiful music. I watched from shadows as they walked into the trees on December 15th, a perfect line of people moving without speaking. Not one looked back at the homes they were abandoning. When Holloway asked why she had been spared, Emma's response chilled him. I was not spared, she said, her voice suddenly dropping to a register Holloway described as impossibly deep. They are merely patient. They watch from spaces between what you perceive. They have followed me here. Deeply disturbed by Emma's testimony and the artifacts recovered from the stone circle, Sheriff Holloway dedicated the second week of March to historical research, searching for any documentation that might illuminate the origins of both the stones and the events that had emptied Blackwood Hollow. The Shannon County archives, though limited, yielded several documents of profound significance when examined chronologically. Most recent was an 1,851 territorial survey conducted prior to Missouri achieving statehood, in which surveyor William Thornton documented the valley later known as Blackwood Hollow. His official report described it as suitable for timber harvesting, though avoided by local woodsmen who consider it haunted, while his private field notes contained a more troubling assessment, an unwholesome place where the light falls wrongly, creating shadows inconsistent with the sun's position. The surveyor further noted the conspicuous absence of animal tracks or bird nests, concluding that all creatures of natural instinct shun this valley, though no obvious cause presents itself. Delving deeper into territorial records, Holloway discovered the journal of Reverend Thomas Blackburn, a Presbyterian missionary who traveled throughout the Ozarks in 1832 attempting to convert indigenous populations. Blackburn recorded conversations with local Osage guides who refused to enter certain valleys, one of which corresponds with Blackwood Hollow's location. The natives speak of a sacred place where the veil between worlds is thin, Blackburn wrote, claiming their ancestors sealed something there using rituals no longer remembered. When pressed for details, my guide would only say that some doors are meant to remain closed and some voices are best left unheard. Most significant was Holloway's discovery within the archives of St. Louis University of partial expedition notes from Jacques Fontaine, a French explorer who traversed the region in 1749. Fontaine's documentation, written in French and later translated by university scholars, contained a passage describing his party's discovery of stone sentinels standing in circle formation, guarding against that which should not enter our world. Fontaine reported that his indigenous guides became hysterical with fear upon approaching the site, warning that the stones hunger for voices to answer their call. The explorer documented unusual phenomena around the stones, including disorientation affecting navigation instruments and unnatural silence, devoid of wildlife sounds. Most disturbing was Fontaine's final notation regarding the site. We departed with haste after our camp was disrupted by whispers emanating from the forest, though no speakers could be located. Two native guides who stood watch nearest the stones complained of headaches and strange dreams. By morning both had fled, abandoning their possessions. The remaining guides insist the men have been hollowed for new purpose and refuse to search for them. The third week of March, 1898 brought a subtle but undeniable darkness to eminence as Sheriff Holloway continued his investigation into the Blackwood Hollow disappearances. His journal entries from this period reveal a spreading contagion of unease affecting everyone connected to the case. Deputies Harris and Jenkins, who had assisted in examining the stone circle, reported independently to Holloway that they were experiencing identical recurring nightmares. Both men describe awakening drenched in sweat, Holloway wrote, haunted by dreams of figures standing motionless among trees at the edge of their vision, watching with unblinking eyes. When they turned to confront these observers, the figures remained just beyond clear sight, moving only when not directly observed. Dr. Morton reported increasingly disturbing behavior from Emma Blackwood, whose physical recovery had plateaued while her psychological state deteriorated. She refuses to sleep in darkness, Morton noted in his medical log, preserved in county records. When lamps are extinguished, she immediately begins screaming that they are coming out of the forest. Most troubling is her insistence that they are already among us, wearing familiar faces. The physician further documented Emma's habit of scratching mysterious symbols into any available surface, patterns that bore disturbing similarity to those carved on the central altar stone. Holloway himself began experiencing phenomena he was reluctant to document in official reports, but recorded in private journal entries. I find myself plagued by the unsettling sensation of being observed whenever my back is turned to an open window or doorway, he confessed on March 18th. Rational thought provides no relief from this perception. More disturbing still, I find myself drawn to return to that accursed circle, though I cannot articulate why. The compulsion grows stronger each night, manifesting as an almost physical pull toward the northwest. The influence appeared to spread beyond those directly involved in the investigation. Town residents reported unusual behavior from previously reliable citizens. The telegraph operator was dismissed after sending nonsensical messages consisting of repetitive symbol patterns. The church minister abruptly canceled services, claiming the building had become compromised by unseen presences. Several residents reported seeing strangers standing at the edge of town after dusk, figures who retreated into the forest when approached. Holloway noted that a miasma of fear has settled over Eminence, with families locking their doors at sunset and children kept from school due to parents' vague but insistent concerns. Most alarming was his March 23rd observation. I cannot escape the conclusion that whatever emptied Blackwood Hollow has followed Emma here. The circle has been disturbed and something is now aware of us all. Despite mounting evidence suggesting supernatural danger, Sheriff Holloway persuaded county officials to authorize a second, more substantial expedition to Blackwood Hollow in early April 1898. His official proposal preserved in county records, cited the need to thoroughly document the site for scientific purposes and investigate potential destruction of the stone formations to prevent further incident. The carefully assembled party departed Eminence on April 7th, consisting of Holloway, 5 deputies, 3 local volunteers experienced in wilderness navigation, Professor Thomas Weldon from the Archaeology Department of St. Louis University, and James Corbett, a photographer from the Springfield Republican Commission to document the stone circle. According to supply requisition forms, the group carried provisions for 2 weeks, blasting powder for potential demolition of the stones, and an unusual quantity of lanterns and lamp oil. Multiple witnesses described the expedition's departure as somber and tense, with Reverend Simmons offering prayers despite his recent erratic behavior. The final documented communication from the party was a message delivered by a supply rider who departed their camp on April 9th, reporting they had reestablished a base at the abandoned Blackwood settlement and planned to proceed to the stone circle the following morning. The rider noted that the men seem uneasy but determined, particularly the sheriff, who appears driven by purpose beyond simple investigation. For 5 days, Eminence received no further word, until the morning of April 15th, when Deputy Samuel Jenkins staggered into town, severely injured and nearly incoherent with terror. Dr. Morton's medical report documents extensive lacerations, consistent with movement through dense brush at high speed with no regard for bodily protection, severe dehydration, and physical exhaustion, indicating continuous movement without rest for multiple days. Most concerning was Jenkins' psychological state, described as acute traumatic hysteria manifesting as paranoid delusion. During brief periods of lucidity, Jenkins provided fragmented accounts of the expedition's fate, claiming the party had been picked off one by one after reaching the stone circle. They came from between the trees. Courthouse clerk Thomas Wilson recorded him saying, wearing familiar faces but moving all wrong, like puppets with too many joints. Jenkins described the horror of watching the thing wearing Holloway's skin, pursuing him through the forest, calling his name in a voice that started as the sheriff's but changed with each repetition, becoming something inhuman. Most disturbing was his insistence that they are following me here, wearing their faces, learning how to be them. Jenkins' condition deteriorated rapidly, with Dr. Morton documenting increasing paranoia, followed by catatonic unresponsiveness. On April 17th, despite being secured in a locked room under continuous observation, Jenkins vanished without explanation. The window remained latched from inside, the door still locked when staff entered to find the room empty. Sheriff Holloway and the remaining 9 expedition members were never seen again. The calculated erasure of the Blackwood Hollow incident began within days of Deputy Jenkins' disappearance, implemented with an efficiency that suggests premeditation rather than mere bureaucratic caution. Court records dated May 3, 1898 document. An emergency closed session of the Shannon County Commission, attended by Judge William Harmon, 3 county commissioners, and representatives from the state capitol in Jefferson City. The resulting declaration, bearing the signatures of all 7 officials, officially attributed the Blackwood settlement's abandonment to catastrophic winter conditions, rendering the location untenable for continued habitation. A supplementary statement claimed residents had likely dispersed to more prosperous regions during early spring thaws, despite the abandoned possessions and lack of evacuation evidence. Most revealing was the Commission's unusual allocation of funds to purchase the entire 200-acre Blackwood property from the missing Josiah Blackwood's estate, immediately redesignating the land as a restricted area under county jurisdiction. Public notices posted throughout Shannon and adjacent counties warned citizens against entering the region due to unstable mining excavations presenting imminent collapse danger, though no mining operations had ever been conducted in the area. County employees were dispatched to physically block the sole access road with felled trees and warning signage. These official actions coincided with a systematic removal of all documentation relating to the investigation from public accessibility. Courthouse records show that on May 7, 1898, Judge Harmon ordered all materials connected to Blackwood Hollow, Sheriff Holloway's investigation, and the stone circle sealed under judicial authority and removed to a secure storage room accessible only with the judge's explicit permission. This included Emma Blackwood's testimony, the artifacts recovered from the stone circle, all correspondence with Professor Woodbridge, and Holloway's official journals. The Springfield Republican, which had initially shown interest in the disappearances, abruptly ceased coverage after their photographer James Corbett vanished with the expedition. A brief article on May 12 merely noted that settlement difficulties in remote Shannon County have been resolved to officials' satisfaction. Perhaps most telling was the county's handling of Emma Blackwood herself. Medical records indicate she was transferred on May 9 from Dr. Morton's care and eminence to the State Lunatic Asylum in Farmington, nearly 150 miles away, under a court order citing dangerous delusions requiring specialized confinement. This removal of the sole surviving witness completed the systematic burial of the entire incident. The coordinated nature of these actions, implemented with minimal discussion and no public announcement, strongly suggests that whatever Shannon County officials discovered about Blackwood Hollow and its stone circle inspired fear profound enough to warrant erasing all traces of its existence, even at the cost of abandoning the search for Sheriff Holloway and 9 missing expedition members. Emma Blackwood's institutionalization at the State Hospital in Farmington began in May 1898 and continued uninterrupted until her death 45 years later, creating one of the longest continuous patient residencies in the facility's history. Hospital records, obtained through Freedom of Information requests by researchers from Missouri State University in 1967, reveal a disturbing consistency in her account despite decades of various treatments, including early electroconvulsive therapy and experimental pharmaceutical interventions. Admission documents describe her as suffering from severe delusional disorder with paranoid features. Yet subsequent clinical notes repeatedly express physicians' unease with this diagnosis. Dr. Samuel Thornton, her primary physician from 1907 to 1923, documented that, despite her unwavering belief in objectively impossible events, patient demonstrates complete lucidity and normal cognitive function in all other respects, creating a diagnostic contradiction that defies conventional psychiatric understanding. Emma reportedly maintained throughout her confinement that the residents of Blackwood Hollow had not died but been replaced or worn by entities that emerged from the forest surrounding the stone circle. "They hollow a person from within," she explained to Dr. Thornton in a 1912 interview transcript, leaving the shell intact but filling it with something else, something that learns to mimic humanity through observation but never quite achieves perfect imitation. Hospital records document her consistent refusal to interact with certain staff members whom she claimed had been replaced, often months before these same employees exhibited behavioral changes or psychological breakdowns that resulted in their departure from the institution. From 1934 until her death, Emma was permitted access to art supplies as therapeutic treatment, producing hundreds of drawings characterized by technical skill and disturbing content. These works, preserved in the hospital archives, predominantly feature human figures with subtly distorted anatomical proportions and facial expressions described by staff as simultaneously familiar and profoundly wrong. Many depict groups of these figures standing at forest edges, watching distant houses or towns with unnaturally intent gazes. Most unsettling was her apparent lack of concern about her continued confinement, telling a new doctor in 1939, "The walls protect you from me, not me from them." Emma maintained a private journal throughout her final years, discovered hidden within her mattress after her death from apparent heart failure on November 17, 1943. The final entry, dated November 16th, contained only one sentence: "They're still spreading. I see them in town now." Hospital staff noted that despite her advanced age of 62, Emma's body exhibited unusual preservation characteristics that required special documentation by the attending mortician. The rediscovery of the Blackwood Hollow incident occurred in 1976, when historian Margaret Wheeler uncovered Sheriff Holloway's journal while researching primary sources for her doctoral dissertation on abandoned Ozark settlements. Wheeler, an associate professor at the University of Missouri, had been granted access to sealed courthouse records as part of a statewide historical preservation initiative. According to her published account in the Journal of Midwestern History, she initially believed the journal to be fiction due to its extraordinary contents that defied rational explanation. Subsequent cross-referencing with land records, newspaper archives, and meteorological data from 1897 confirmed the factual foundation of Holloway's account and revealed the systematic effort to suppress all information related to the incident. Wheeler's attempt to physically locate Blackwood Hollow led her to a remote valley approximately 18 miles southwest of Eminence that matched geographical descriptions from Holloway's notes but contained no visible evidence of human habitation. "The absence of ruins is itself unnatural," Wheeler wrote in her field journal. "A settlement of that size should have left foundations, well structures, mill equipment, or at least visible property boundaries, yet the forest appears primordially untouched." Forest Service management plans obtained through Freedom of Information requests revealed that the area corresponding to Blackwood Hollow had been deliberately excluded from all logging operations since 1915, despite extensive harvesting of surrounding tracts, with internal memoranda designating it a watershed protection zone, despite the absence of any significant water source. Most compelling was Wheeler's statistical analysis of missing persons reports from Shannon and adjacent counties, documenting disappearance rates nearly 3 times the national average within a 50-mile radius of the former settlement's location across 8 decades. These disappearances followed no discernible pattern regarding age, gender, or socioeconomic status, though Wheeler noted a subtle increase during winter months. Her research notes, housed in the Missouri Historical Society archives, contain transcripts from interviews with longtime residents who described encounters with strange folk who don't quite seem human on remote forest roads, particularly after dusk. "They look normal enough at first glance," reported Henry Burroughs, a mail carrier since 1949. "But something in their movement catches your eye, too smooth somehow, and when they speak, the words come in an odd rhythm, like they're still learning how our mouths should work." Wheeler's investigation ended abruptly in November 1978 when she accepted a prestigious position at Cornell University, abandoning both her Blackwood Hollow research and her nearly completed book manuscript without explanation. Attempts by colleagues to discuss the project reportedly met with uncharacteristic hostility, followed by her complete withdrawal from academic life within 6 months. Today, the precise location of Blackwood Hollow has been deliberately obscured. Modern maps, redrawn to exclude its existence through a combination of bureaucratic reclassification and geographical renaming that renders historical correlation nearly impossible. The Ozark forest has reclaimed whatever physical evidence might have remained of the settlement, the structures long since rotted into the earth, nature's patient erasure, completing what human efforts began in 1898. Yet, despite this systematic obliteration, the legacy of Blackwood Hollow persists in the collective behavior of local residents who continue to avoid certain sections of the wilderness without articulating precisely why, areas where, according to regional folklore, the shadows move differently, and where modern electronic devices inexplicably malfunction or fail entirely. Mark Reynolds, who served as a Missouri Department of Conservation officer from 1992 to 2017, documented in his unpublished memoir numerous instances of discovering abandoned camping equipment in these regions, often with food still cooking on stoves and personal belongings arranged as if the owners had simply walked away mid-activity. "Most disturbing," he wrote, "was how quickly the search parties would abandon efforts, sometimes within hours, often after team members reported experiencing unexplained audio phenomena or disorientation that defied their extensive wilderness training." Statistical analysis conducted by the Missouri Highway Patrol in 2015 reveals that disappearance rates within the general region remain elevated compared to similar rural areas, though precise geographical correlation proves difficult due to the uncertain location of the original settlement. Perhaps most unsettling are the infrequent but persistent encounters reported by hikers on remote trails, documented in numerous online forums and occasionally local newspapers. Descriptions of silent figures observed at a distance, standing motionless among trees, who when approached move with what witnesses consistently describe as unsettling fluidity, and occasionally engage hikers with questions delivered in voices that sound hollow, as if practicing human speech. The Blackwood Hollow incident represents far more than historical curiosity or unsolved mystery, suggesting the presence of something ancient and fundamentally other that was awakened by human encroachment and continues to move through the remote valleys and dense forests of the Ozarks, gradually expanding its influence across generations. If you find yourself traveling those winding back roads as twilight approaches, pay careful attention to those you encounter standing alone near the tree line. Watch for movements that seem slightly wrong, for eyes that reflect light with unusual intensity or not at all, and for expressions that approximate human emotion without truly capturing it. And if you hear voices calling your name from among the darkening trees, remember the fate of Blackwood Hollow. Some calls are best left unanswered,